Tonight, a final case from the X-Files, Texas mysteries worthy of X-Files plots.
You've heard this one, serial killer stalking young couples on Lover's Lane. But it isn't fiction, it's the real deal, a legendary predator that people in Texarkana have always known as the Phantom Killer.
The incredible story you are about to see is true.
The legend of Texarkana's Phantom Killer fascinated America for decades. Eventually, it was immortalized on the silver screen.
What'd you do that for?
I heard something.
A film called The Town That Dreaded Sundown mangled the story as only Hollywood can. But the basics were there, a hooded serial killer stalking young couples on lovers' lanes. That part is true, and the conclusion as well. The Phantom Killer got away with it. No one was ever charged. February 1946, two young lovers parked along Richmond Lane, then just a dirt road on the outskirts of town. Suddenly, a man in a white hood approaches with a pistol and a flashlight in his hands. The young man is dragged from the car and beaten unconscious, the young woman viciously raped. But at least in the first case, the Phantom's victims survive. 3 weeks later to the day, another Lover's Lane attack outside Texarkana. This time, the couple was murdered.
And once it had been reported that this was the pattern, every 3 weeks this mysterious killer was loose, people became very alarmed. And
James Presley was then a teenager. He said when another Lover's Lane double murder occurred 3 weeks later, alarm turned to panic.
It was after the second double murders they started using the name Phantom in the local newspaper. No one felt like he or she was safe. And of course we had everything locked and we had our guns handy and so forth. And this was a pattern that was repeated all over town.
At that time, had not had anything like this.
Tillman Johnson was then a deputy sheriff on the Arkansas side.
People were frightened, not only here, but for miles around here. When dark came, the kids came in. People didn't go downtown too much. They were frightened.
Life magazine gave it front page coverage, and hordes of policemen came to town. The state sent its most famous lawman, Texas Ranger Lone Wolf Gonzalez. But the one and only break in the case was the work of two small-town cops from nearby Atlanta, Texas, who followed a car thief named Yule Sweeney into downtown Texarkana.
I got down there after they had started chasing him.
Johnson suspected they'd caught the Phantom Killer from the moment that Sweeney was put in his car.
He thought that's what we were picking him up for. He says, hell, I know you don't electrocute people for stealing a car.
And you hadn't said anything about it?
Nobody had said a word to him about anything.
55 years later, Tillman Johnson is still mesmerized by the case. He's the only surviving lawman from that era, and his are the only files.
Sweeney never did admit anything.
But Sweeney's wife, Peggy, did.
Now, it took maybe 3 or 4 different statements at different times from her. We eventually got her to talking.
Johnson still has a copy of Peggy Sweeney's polygraph examination. She talks about the murder of Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker and admits she was there when Yule Sweeney committed them.
She gave us quite a bit of information about the Booker and Martin killing that was later confirmed.
That's all the cops ever got on Sweeney, testimony from a wife they couldn't use in court. Instead, he was sent to prison for car theft, getting a long sentence as a habitual criminal.
In my own mind, I think that he did.
In any event, the murders stopped, and young love triumphed again.
As frightened as the people in the public was, the young couple still continued to park on the roads after this. And we would patrol the roads and the lanes and try to keep them off of it, but it didn't.
I just started compiling all the information. And
Mark Bledsoe represents generations who've grown up in Texarkana after the Phantom disappeared.
Still to this day, they tell about the Phantom Killer.
When he became a probation officer, he started digging for information and Yule Sweeney.
every time that he got out of prison, he would commit another offense and end up back in prison.
In 1992, Bledsoe drove to a halfway house in Dallas where Sweeney was supposed to be living.
I saw this elderly man kind of bent over with a big old white cowboy hat on, and I thought, well, that'd be funny if that was the Phantom.
Inside, Bledsoe was told that he'd missed Yul Sweeney, a bent-over old man in a white cowboy hat. Mark rushed out to the street, but once again, the Phantom was gone. Bledsoe did connect with Sweeney a couple months later, but by then the old con had suffered a stroke and was in a Dallas nursing home.
His whole demeanor did change when the subject of the Phantom was brought up. He denied it. He also denied being married, which I felt like that was really unusual since that's the only reason he got off. I would say that I'm 100% sure that it was Yul Sweeney that committed several of the Phantom killer murders, and that he got away with it.
Yul Sweeney, car thief, habitual criminal, longtime con. In the end, a lot of the evidence does seem to point to him, and thus, mystery solved. Well, maybe not.
Over the years, relatives of murder victims have received anonymous phone calls from a woman, middle-aged maybe, apologizing for what she said her father had done. As far as anyone can determine, Yul Sweeney never had a daughter.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a puzzler.
And it could be. My mind's open on this thing. If Sweeney didn't do it, we can find somebody that did do it, why, let's get after him.
The reason this is called a mystery is because it fits all the molds of a mystery. And the ends get looser as time goes on.
Texarkana today still looks pretty much the same. And if you should ask people here on the streets what they believe happened to the Phantom Killer, most would say that he is still living here and is walking free.